Carol, after 18 years, we're eliminating your department, Raymond said casually, leaning back in his leather chair. Budget cuts. Pack up by Wednesday. His tone was as flat as if he were ordering lunch. I sat across from him, nodding calmly. I understand completely. The relief that washed over his face was almost comical. He'd expected tears, anger, or at least some negotiation. Instead, I stood up, smoothed down my skirt, and walked out of his office with my head held high. My name is Carol Jennings, and I've spent 58 years on this earth learning one important lesson. Patience pays dividends. For nearly 2 decades at Hollowgate Systems in Seattle, Washington, I built the compliance department from a one-person operation into a team of 15 dedicated professionals. We were the company's immune system, preventing infections before they could take hold and spread. When I started, the company was small, scrappy, and cutting corners. I implemented rigorous protocols, trained staff, managed expanding budgets, and kept us out of legal trouble. We helped transform Hollowgate from a regional player into a respected name in data security. Our department saved the company millions in potential fines and lawsuits. And Raymond Shaw had just eliminated us with less consideration than canceling a magazine subscription. Back at my desk, I opened my drawer and looked at the small voice recorder I'd kept there for 3 years. I pressed stop on today's recording, the final one I would need. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Janine Brooks, our head of legal. Need to meet Wednesday. Confidential. It's important. Her response was immediate. My office, 10 a.m. 3 years ago, Raymond had been brought in as part of a management shuffle. Fresh from a competitor with slicked-back hair and MBA buzzwords, he immediately began pushing for streamlining and efficiency improvements. To him, compliance was just red tape. Unnecessary bureaucracy standing between the company and higher profits. At first, it was small things. Skipping required refresher trainings, rushing approvals without proper review. Then came the falsified signatures on compliance documents, the backdated certifications, and direct orders to ignore established protocols. When I confronted him, his response was always the same. Just make it happen, Carol. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody wins. What Raymond never understood was that I hadn't devoted my career to compliance because I loved bureaucracy. I did it because I'd seen what happens when companies prioritize short-term gains over long-term integrity. People lose jobs. Lives get ruined. Sometimes people actually do get hurt. So I documented everything. Every directive to cut corners, every falsified report, every potential violation, all meticulously organized and backed up in triplicate. Because I knew that eventually, Raymond would make his move against the department he saw as nothing but an obstacle. And now, he had. Growing up in a blue-collar family in Tacoma, I learned early that the world doesn't reward good people simply for being good. My father worked 40 years at the shipyard, only to be laid off 6 months before his pension would have vested. The company restructured, and suddenly decades of loyalty meant nothing. He never recovered from that betrayal, spending his final years bitter and broken. They'll smile while they stab you in the back, Carrie, he'd told me. Always keep your eyes open. I carried that lesson with me throughout my career. When I joined Hollowgate Systems in 2006, it was a promising company with good products but loose operations. The founders were brilliant engineers who needed someone to build infrastructure around their innovations. I became that someone. Year after year, I expanded our compliance framework as the company grew. I hired the right people, developed training programs, and created systems that protected both the company and its clients. The previous CEO, Thomas Miller, understood the value we provided and supported our work fully. Carol runs the department that keeps us all employed, he used to say at company meetings. When she talks, we listen. But Thomas retired 5 years ago, and the new leadership team had different priorities. Quarterly results, market share, growth at all costs. Raymond Shaw epitomized this new direction. The first time I sensed trouble was during a quarterly review meeting in 2021. Raymond interrupted my presentation on updated data security requirements. "Carol, these extra steps are killing our deployment schedule," he said, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Our competitors aren't doing all this. We need to be more flexible." After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Look, I respect what you've built here, but times are changing. Sometimes we need to interpret regulations creatively." That night, I purchased the voice recorder. Over the following months, Raymond's creative interpretations became increasingly brazen. He directed teams to ship products before security testing was complete. He had my staff falsify training records for audits. He personally signed off on compliance certifications without performing the required reviews. Each violation went into my growing file. I wasn't being vindictive. I was protecting myself and my team. If anything went wrong, Raymond would ensure we took the fall. I'd seen it happen before. My department became a target for his frustration. He cut our budget repeatedly, blocked promotions for my staff, and excluded us from key meetings. Still, we persisted, doing our best to maintain standards despite increasing pressure. I never expected him to eliminate the entire department. That was bolder than I thought even Raymond would dare. But I was prepared nonetheless. Tuesday morning, the day after Raymond's bombshell announcement, the compliance department was in chaos. My team gathered in our conference room, faces displaying various stages of shock, anger, and fear. 18 years? And this is how they treat us? Said Vivian, my deputy who'd been with me for 12 years. No warning, no transition plan. It's unbelievable. What about our ongoing projects? Asked Thomas, our newest team member. The ISO certification is due next month. Who's handling that? I let them vent their frustrations for a few minutes before calling the room to order. I know this is difficult news, and it's completely unfair. But right now, we need to focus on documenting everything and ensuring a clean handover. Handover to whom? Vivian asked bitterly. They're scrapping everything we've built. I met her gaze steadily. Just because they're eliminating our department doesn't mean the work disappears. Someone will have to pick up these responsibilities and they'll need our documentation. The team looked unconvinced, but they trusted me. We spent the day organizing files, creating process guides, and preparing handover notes. Throughout it all, I maintained a calm exterior, though inside I was cycling through my own emotions. First disbelief, then white-hot anger, and finally, cold determination. During lunch, I slipped away to meet with Philip Johnson from IT security. He'd been an ally over the years, often backing me in disagreements with Raymond. I heard what happened, he said as we sat in a cafe across from the office. It's insane. The auditors will have a field day when they discover there's no compliance function. That's assuming they discover it, I replied. Raymond's probably planning to distribute our responsibilities across departments, making it look like everything's covered. Philip shook his head. Classic Shaw move. Eliminate the expertise. Keep the window dressing. I leaned forward. Philip, I need a favor. Can you preserve the access log showing who modified our compliance documentation system over the past 3 years? And the backup copies of the original documents? His eyes widened slightly. Carol, what are you planning? I'm planning to protect this company from Raymond's recklessness, I said simply. Will you help? He didn't hesitate. The logs will be in your email by end of day. Just be careful. Back at the office, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a termination agreement. In exchange for 2 months' severance pay, I would waive any right to contest my termination and agree to a non-disclosure clause about company operations. The amount was insultingly small for someone of my tenure and position. This was Raymond's final humiliation, expecting me to sign away nearly 2 decades of service for a pittance. I placed the unsigned agreement in my drawer next to the recorder. Tomorrow, I would bring everything to Janine Brooks. The head of legal had always been professional with me, though we weren't close. But I knew her reputation for integrity. For the first time since Raymond's announcement, I allowed myself a small smile. He thought Wednesday would be my end at Hollowgate. He was wrong. It would be his. Wednesday morning arrived with gloomy Seattle rain that matched the mood in our department. People moved silently through their final tasks, occasionally stopping to exchange contact information or quiet words of encouragement. I had arranged a goodbye lunch for later, but first I had my meeting with Janine. I arrived at her office at precisely 10 a.m., carrying a nondescript accordion folder. Her assistant nodded me in immediately. Janine Brooks was a formidable woman in her early 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her office was immaculate, with law degrees and professional certifications displayed on one wall and family photos on another, a reminder that she was both accomplished and human. "Carol," she said, rising to shake my hand. "I was sorry to hear about your department. These restructurings are never easy." "Thank you," I replied, taking a seat across from her desk. "But I'm not here to complain about the elimination of my position." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "What can I help you with then?" I placed the folder on her desk. "For the past 3 years, I've been documenting systematic compliance violations directed by Raymond Shaw. What began as cutting corners has evolved into potentially criminal violations of data security laws, falsification of regulatory filings, and fraud." Janine's expression remained neutral, but she sat up straighter. "Those are serious allegations." "They're not allegations. They're documented facts," I said, opening the folder. "This contains emails, memos, meeting notes, and audio recordings that prove Raymond has been deliberately circumventing compliance requirements and falsifying documentation." I laid out evidence methodically. Emails where Raymond explicitly directed staff to skip required security protocols, recordings of meetings where he ordered backdating of compliance certificates, documentation showing his signature on verification forms for reviews he never conducted. Janine examined each piece carefully, her frown deepening. When she reached the section on client data handling violations, she looked up sharply. "If this is accurate, we've been misrepresenting our security protocols to federal clients. That's potentially criminal." "It is accurate," I confirmed. "I've included the original requirements, Raymond's directives to bypass them, and evidence of false certification submitted to clients and regulators." She leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk. "Why bring this to me now, Carol? Why not earlier?" It was a fair question. I tried addressing these issues internally first. I have documentation of 7 meetings with Raymond where I raised concerns. Each time he dismissed them and increased pressure on my department. When that didn't work, he began excluding us from project reviews where we would have identified violations. I paused, then added, "I was planning to bring this to you next month after our annual compliance audit. The elimination of my department accelerated the timeline." "I see." Janine closed the folder and sat in silence for a moment. "You understand I'll need to verify all of this." "Of course. Everything is organized by incident, with supporting documentation. The flash drive contains the audio recordings and additional electronic evidence. Philip Johnson in IT security can confirm the authenticity of the system logs." She nodded, then asked a question that caught me off guard. "What do you want from this, Carol?" I'd been so focused on exposing Raymond that I hadn't fully considered my own desired outcome. "I want the company to address these violations before they cause real harm. Some may require disclosure to clients or regulators. Beyond that," I met her gaze steadily, "I want Raymond Shaw held accountable for putting Hollowgate at risk to advance his own career." "That's it? You're not seeking reinstatement or compensation?" I shook my head. "This isn't about my job. It's about doing what's right." Janine studied me for a long moment. "I'll need to take this to the CEO. Can you be available tomorrow morning?" "I'll make myself available." As I stood to leave, she added, "Carol, don't discuss this with anyone else for now. And thank you for bringing it to us rather than outside authorities." I nodded and left, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The wheels were in motion. I spent the afternoon with my team at our goodbye lunch, trying to focus on their concerns rather than my meeting with Janine. We gathered at Bailey's, a restaurant near the office that had hosted countless department celebrations over the years. The owner recognized us and offered a private room at no extra charge, a small kindness that nearly broke my composure. As we shared memories and exchanged promises to stay in touch, I felt a stab of guilt. These people had trusted me, followed my lead, and now their careers were in limbo. Even if my evidence resulted in action against Raymond, it wouldn't automatically restore their jobs. "I want to thank all of you," I said, raising my glass of iced tea. "The work we've done has been important, even if it wasn't always appreciated. I'm proud of what we accomplished together, and I have no doubt each of you will go on to success elsewhere." Vivian wiped away a tear. "It won't be the same without your leadership, Carol. You taught us that integrity matters, even when it's inconvenient." "Especially when it's inconvenient," I corrected gently, and the group chuckled. After lunch, I returned to the office to finish clearing my desk. As I was packing the last of my personal items, Raymond appeared in my doorway. "All set to go, Carol?" he asked, too cheerfully. "I'll need your badge and company phone before you leave." I handed them over without comment. His smile faltered slightly at my calm compliance. "Listen, I know this is difficult, but business decisions aren't personal. I've always respected your thoroughness." The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl, but I maintained my professional demeanor. "Of course, Raymond. Business is business." He nodded, apparently satisfied that I was accepting my fate without trouble. "The severance agreement, did you have a chance to review it?" "I did," I replied neutrally. "And?" "I'll have my response by tomorrow." Something in my tone must have alerted him because his eyes narrowed slightly. "The terms are standard, Carol. I'd advise not dragging this out." "Thank you for your concern," I said, closing my box of belongings. "I'll be in touch." As I walked past him toward the elevator, I felt his gaze following me. For the first time, there was uncertainty in his expression. Good. Let him wonder. I had just reached my car when my phone buzzed with a text from Philip. "You should know. RS accessed compliance systems after hours last night. Appears he was modifying documentation. All changes logged per your request." My heart raced. This was unexpected, but not surprising. Raymond was covering his tracks, not realizing we had preserved the original records. His actions only strengthened our case against him. I texted back. "Thank you. Can you secure those logs immediately?" His response came quickly. "Already done. Sent to your personal email with encryption. Key phrase is your favorite saying from our first meeting." I smiled, remembering. When Philip and I had first worked together 8 years ago, I had told him, "In compliance, we're not the party police. We're the people who make sure everyone gets home safely after the party." That evening, I received another message, this one from Janine. "CEO reviewed initial evidence. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Your presence requested at 11 a.m., confidential." As I prepared for bed, I received one final text, from Raymond himself. "Carol, let's meet for coffee tomorrow, 8 a.m. Need to discuss your transition package. Potential for improvement if we can align." So he was getting nervous. Perhaps he'd discovered that I'd met with Janine, or maybe he was just trying to secure my silence. Either way, his timing was telling. I texted back, "Unfortunately not available at 8. Happy to speak by phone." His response came immediately. "Dinner then? My treat." "Sorry, prior commitment. We'll call you tomorrow afternoon." I turned off my phone, not waiting for his reply. Tomorrow would be soon enough to watch Raymond Shaw's carefully constructed facade crumble. Thursday morning, I dressed with particular care. A charcoal suit I reserved for important presentations, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, and a silk scarf in Hollowgate's signature blue. If this was to be my final appearance at the company, I would face it with dignity. The call from Janine came at 10:30 a.m. The board is ready for you now. Can you come directly to the executive conference room on the 12th floor? I'm already in the building. I'll be right up. I had arrived early, sitting quietly in the lobby cafe where I could observe the comings and goings. I'd seen Raymond arrive at 7:45, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. At 8:30, 2 board members had entered together, their expressions grim. By 9:15, the entire executive team had hurried in, none stopping for their usual coffee. As I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, I took deep breaths to calm my racing heart. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability. The executive conference room was imposing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, a massive table of polished walnut, and 12 serious faces turned toward me as I entered. Raymond sat at the far end, his face ashen. Beside him was Gerald Winters, the CEO, whose normally affable expression had been replaced by something much harder. "Miss Jennings, thank you for joining us," said Eleanor Richardson, the board chairwoman. "Please, take a seat." I sat in the empty chair directly across from Raymond. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We've spent the morning reviewing the evidence you provided to Miss Brooks," Eleanor continued. "We've also heard Mr. Shaw's response to these allegations." Gerald leaned forward. "Before we continue, I want to be clear. We're treating this matter with the utmost seriousness. The board has authorized a full independent investigation." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I appreciate that." "What we need from you now," Eleanor said, "is to understand why you collected this evidence over 3 years without bringing it to the attention of the board or outside authorities." It was a fair question, but also a defensive one. They were concerned about their own liability. "I did raise these issues through proper channels initially," I replied calmly. "I have documentation of multiple attempts to address compliance violations with Mr. Shaw directly. When that proved ineffective, I began documenting the issues more comprehensively." "That doesn't answer why you waited 3 years," pressed one of the board members. "Because I believed in this company and wanted to resolve the issues internally," I said. "I was building a case that couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding or a difference in interpretation. And frankly, I hoped Mr. Shaw would correct course before it became necessary to take this step." Raymond finally spoke, his voice tight. "This is clearly retaliatory. Carol was upset about losing her position and—" "Actually," Janine interrupted, "the first documented incident in Miss Jennings' evidence predates any discussion of department elimination by nearly 3 years, and the electronic logs confirm the timeline." Eleanor turned to me again. "Miss Jennings, in light of what we've learned, we'd like to discuss your continued relationship with Hollowgate." I met her gaze steadily. "With respect, Chairwoman, my concern is not for my position. It's for the company's integrity and the potential harm to clients from these violations." "Nevertheless," Gerald interjected, "we believe it would be in everyone's interest if you would consider returning to help us address these issues." Before I could respond, the door opened and a man in a crisp suit entered, nodding to Eleanor. "This is Mr. Atkins from our outside counsel," she explained. "Given the potential legal implications, he'll be joining us." As Mr. Atkins took his seat, Raymond stood abruptly. "This is absurd. I've built this company's market position over the past 5 years, while compliance has been nothing but a cost center." "Sit down, Mr. Shaw," Eleanor said sharply. "Your future with this company is very much in question at this moment." I watched as the realization dawned on Raymond's face. This wasn't a meeting to manage a problem employee. It was the beginning of his downfall. 1 week after my meeting with the board, I sat in Gerald Winters' office, reviewing the findings of the independent investigation. The results were even more damning than my evidence had suggested. Raymond's violations extended beyond my department, affecting product development, client contracts, and financial reporting. "The board has terminated Raymond's employment, effective immediately," Gerald informed me. We've also self-reported the relevant violations to regulatory authorities and initiated contact with affected clients. I nodded, feeling not triumph, but profound relief. That's the responsible approach. We'd like you to head our newly expanded Compliance and Ethics Division, Gerald continued. With expanded authority, direct reporting to the board, and a seat on the executive committee. The offer was everything I could have wanted professionally, but I hesitated. What about my team? We're offering positions to all 15 members, with increased responsibilities and appropriate compensation adjustments, he assured me. The board recognizes now that eliminating compliance was short-sighted. That's putting it mildly, I observed. Gerald had the grace to look embarrassed. I should have been more attentive to the concerns you raised over the years. For that, I apologize. I considered his offer carefully. The easy path would be to accept, return to the position I'd built, and continue my work. But something had fundamentally changed. I appreciate the offer, Gerald, but I need time to consider it. The past week has been clarifying for me. He looked surprised but nodded. Of course. The offer remains open. As I left his office, I passed Raymond's former space. Workers were already removing his name from the door. 3 executives who had previously avoided eye contact with me now smiled and nodded in greeting. Word had spread quickly. In the elevator, I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from executive recruiters and a text from Vivian. Team meeting at Bailey's 5 p.m., big news to share. I smiled. My team was already moving forward, with or without Hollowgate. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I realized I was too. 6 months later, I stood addressing the audience at the National Compliance Officers Conference in Dallas. My keynote speech, Ethical Guardianship in the Age of Acceleration, had drawn a capacity crowd. Compliance isn't just about rules and regulations, I concluded. It's about creating a culture where doing the right thing isn't exceptional. It's expected. Where integrity isn't a department, but a shared value. The applause was gratifying, but more meaningful were the nodding heads of professionals who understood the daily challenges of upholding standards in environments focused on speed and profit. Afterward, during the reception, a young woman approached me. Miss Jennings, your story has been an inspiration to many of us. The way you stood up for principles, even at personal risk. It's what this profession should be about. Thank you, I replied, touched by her sincerity. But remember, documentation without action is just record-keeping. The hardest part is knowing when to act on what you've gathered. She nodded earnestly. I'd love to learn more about your new consulting practice. After declining Gerald's offer at Hollowgate, I had launched Jennings Integrity Advisors, helping companies build robust ethical frameworks rather than mere compliance checkboxes. Already, we had clients across 4 states and a waiting list of others. More surprisingly, Hollowgate had become our biggest client. Gerald had hired us to rebuild their compliance culture from the ground up, with my former team serving as internal partners in the transformation. Raymond, meanwhile, had not fared well. The regulatory investigations triggered by Hollowgate's self-disclosure had revealed similar patterns at his previous employers. His certification as a security professional had been revoked, and he was now facing potential civil penalties. Justice, I reflected, often arrives at its own pace. But it does arrive. My new life hadn't been part of any plan, but somehow it felt right, using my experience to help others avoid the mistakes I'd witnessed firsthand. The lessons I learned during my 18 years at Hollowgate had become the foundation for helping other organizations build cultures of integrity, not just compliance. Every company I advised was one more where employees could do their jobs without compromising their values, and where leaders understood that shortcuts inevitably lead to longer, costlier paths in the end.